Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Insider Gaming Developer Spotlight. I'm, of course, Senior Editor Mike Straw here, and I'm joined by the one, the only Mike Hermann, creator of RetroMania Wrestling from RetroSoft Studios. And we are here, Mike, with a big announcement. But before we get into that, how you doing? How have you been? It's been a while.
Yeah, I'm doing great, Mike. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. We've been super busy working on this update that's coming out, and we're really excited about all the stuff we're packing into this DLC, and then just the little surprise we have to discuss in a little bit. But yeah, we're super busy but super excited at the same time.
Before we get into everything that's coming in this DLC and to talk about just what RetroMania Wrestling has gone through over the past 4 years since its release, the big news that is just dropping now as people are tuning into this is that Macho Man Randy Savage is the 6th man coming in the DLC update later this year in September. I gotta tell you, I tried to run through all these possible names. I had a bunch, it didn't even come into my mind that it was Randy Savage. So right off the bat, how did you manage to get one of the biggest legends in wrestling history licensed for this game?
You know, one of the things we've found is that it's been very difficult to navigate who's available and who isn't. And I learned a lot, 4 years ago, like you said, was a long time ago. I had never licensed anyone in my life at that point. So the whole licensing idea was very daunting initially. But now I've kind of learned to navigate a little bit through the world. And things kind of happen where you figure out who you might be able to get. And the thing with Savage is the game WrestleQuest by MegaCat Studios had come out, and they had Macho Man, and they're not a WWE game. So that was kind of my first hint. And then Matt Cardona had a Macho Man action figure. Again, another non-WWE and a completely separate entity than MegaCat Studios. So I'm thinking, all right, who represents, the estate of Macho Man, and, can I get him? So we made a phone call. They got back to me pretty quickly, and we laid out what our project was, what we had done. They were really impressed with what we had done this part, and they saw that it would be a great fit for Macho Man to be in RetroMania. So once we heard that, I was ecstatic, obviously, because I would have loved to have Macho Man. A lot of people say Macho Man should have been in WrestleFest, the first one, and I think he was commentating or something at the time. I think Warrior had just retired him. It was before the Macho King gimmick had started, but he, or maybe not. Maybe that already started. I'm getting my timeline confused. But anyway, he should have been in WrestleFest, and now he's in RetroMania and just looks and plays fantastic.
How? Just before we get into the rest of the DLC with Macho Man, what was it like dealing with? I mean, obviously, you said like you saw him in WrestleQuest and then kind of worked from there, but how quick did the deal come together when you realized there was potential? Was it like instant, or was there a lot of back and forth on how you were going to use him and things like that?
I mean, it was a little bit of back and forth, just negotiating the terms and what the payout was going to be for him. But honestly, CMG was really great to deal with. That's CMG's who represents him, and I didn't. It was a lot easier than I thought, because I thought, like, just based on the question, the way you asked it, I did think it was going to be a very painful process. Yeah. But once we kind of laid out, I think it would have been harder to sign him if I didn't have the success we had already had with RetroMania and how well it was reviewed and a good quality product. Because I'm guessing, and I don't know this for sure, but I'm guessing when you get to a CMG, this obviously wasn't their first rodeo, and they know what to look out for. And the fact that we already had a proven track record and we had already produced a product that was received very well, I think made it a lot easier to negotiate with them.
Now, before we talked, I was shown assets, looking at what he looks like in game, and as we're talking, the teaser trailer will be shown. So if people are just figuring it out that this is coming, you guys are seeing on screen what we're all seeing. how difficult was it, or as far as compared to what you guys have done with with animating, creating the sprites, the design of making sure this reflected the Macho Man Randy Savage that everybody would come to expect?
Yeah, good question. So, the first decision we really had to make is what kind of era Macho Man were we going to use? Because the way our game works, we obviously the big knock and still the knock is we don't have a creator wrestler, which we've done a few things to kind of help with that. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but we don't have a creator wrestler. So we really had to pick, all right, which era of Savage are we going to use? And really, it was more of a nostalgia thing for me. I went back to the original when he brought out all the different managers in the WWF ring, and they were all vying to see who would represent them. And then he brought out Miss Elizabeth, and that look that he had then is the one I wanted to go with. So it was that kind of WrestleMania 2 era when he first debuted in WWF. That was the one we wanted to go with. So we knew that. We started grabbing footage for the artists to go through. As far as just adding Macho Man and the additional DLC that we're adding to this, the way, unfortunately, our pipeline is, each wrestler we add requires exponentially more sprites. So we have Macho Man has, eight or so brand new moves to the game. But we also have to animate the other 24 wrestlers that are in the game now to get hit with those moves, to take those moves. So we've gotten a little bit better about reusing certain sprites where we can. But just each character we add, unfortunately, a little bit of my short-sightedness. Remember, this was a passion project. I was hoping not to, take a bath in making and get out. I didn't think we'd get past 16 wrestlers. Initially we were advertising 8 to 16 wrestlers because I didn't know what I could afford to actually put in the game. But, we bit the bullet and did 16, and then we got up to 19, and the game was still selling. So, we decided, a little while ago, let's go for a DLC and really try to pack it. And then we got, the rest of this DLC is really packed. There's no slouches in this DLC at all. Not that I think there's any slouches in RetroMania, but from a kind of a legendary wrestler look, we got some really heavy hitters in this DLC. So, it just kind of all came together. And Macho Man, it was important to me to get some of the moves right. And I would say the most complex thing I really wanted in the game is where Macho Man would run with somebody's head and kind of do a hangman over the top rope. And in a 2D world, it's a little bit more of a complicated move where you're going from in the ring to outside of the ring. But it came out awesome. It's probably my new favorite move in the game, possibly.
And now the DLC, it launches September 13th, 2025 for all platforms. Yep. Includes Macho Man, but that's not all. Also coming as playable wrestlers in this are 5 other wrestlers: Magnum TA, the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson. And now we can finally stop asking the question, where's Demolition? Since day one, when I first talked to you, that was the running joke with this game. Yep. And now you can finally tell people Demolition's in the game. You've obviously announced these names prior to this.
Right.
What was it like to, was it kind of similar in getting the licensing for these 5 compared to what you've had to do in the past, or were some easier than others, or how did that process work, adding the rest of these wrestlers coming in the DLC?
So those were actually easier. So the story with Demolition, I met Bill Eadie at a convention kind of close to my house, within an hour of my house a couple of years ago. And at the time, they couldn't do Demolition. And this is like, I would say 2000, it's probably before COVID even. And he's like, we just can't do it. I would love to license it to you, but, I can't in good conscience do it. And then, again, fast forward, I saw Matt Cardona came out with Demolition action figures, and they weren't WWE figures. So I already had Bill gave me his phone number. So I called Bill and I said, hey, are you guys available now? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, would you be interested? He's like, yeah, let's do it. So that was like a phone call, I would say, between me reaching back out to him and then getting a contract signed with Bill and Barry was within a week. So that one went really well. Same with the Rock and Roll Express. I had reached out through Ricky, just like a DM through Twitter, he's pretty or on X. He's pretty active there. Got back to me. I talked to his son Kerry a little bit, and we got that signed with him and Robert real quick. And then I reached out to Magnum, who when I first started Magnum, and I know I've told this story on other interviews, but Magnum was my first favorite wrestler ever. So I wanted him initially, but he was under a Legends deal at the time, which has since expired. I reached back out to Magnum and was a great person. I've gotten to know him, one of the most guys that I've gotten to know very well through this process, or pretty well through this process. Really great guy. He's helped me a lot, given me some advice inside the kind of the world of wrestling and the kind of the behind the curtain type stuff. And he was, again, another guy that was really easy to sign. So surprisingly, the other 5 of this DLC were pretty straightforward.
With this DLC, it's a mix of paid DLC, $10 when it launches, but also a bunch of free updates. We'll get to the paid editions in a minute, but these free updates, there's going to be new tag team mechanics you're introducing, a number of new moves, new drop downs and leapfrog system, dog pile pins, run collisions, walk speed options in order to help slow down the gameplay if that's more your speed, reanimations for moves that already exist in the game, hiding the HUD, new camera modes, like all this stuff. And then on top of that, with the paid, 3 new stages to bring it, I think, to above 20, if I'm not mistaken. New handicap match types, the wrestlers, house show game. There is so much here. How did you decide on what maybe to break down into free versus paid, or just what to add in general? Because this is something that has been in the works for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, we're going on a year and a half since our last update. So the last update was a free one where we added wrestlers, we added new animations. We had a lot of bug fixes and stuff like that. And really quality of life stuff that really got the game to a point where we really wanted to get it. And we felt, all right, I felt like and we didn't really get a lot of complaints or a lot of backlash on not, delivering what we had promised. Because I think everything we publicly said we would do, we did in the initial game, pretty much right out of the gate. But I felt like it was missing something, and I wanted to add more. So that's why we did a couple free updates at that point. So then it got to the game. It got the game into a state where I was happy with it for the most part. And then we started going, all right, what else do we want to add? And some of the things we want to add kind of just felt like this should be a base game update. Wouldn't really go into a DLC. And honestly, programmatically, some stuff was just easier to include in the base game because there was no way to kind of segregate it out programmatically from the other stuff. Like the drop downs and leapfrogs. It was kind of a system we were going to add to the gameplay mechanics. And it would just be too hard to try to segregate that off. And honestly, I think, just because maybe some people can't or don't want to pay another $10, but I still think it's worth giving them a good set of features that they can look forward to. And a lot of the stuff I'll say in the free version of the update is stuff that we really listened to the players. We watched our social media. We got a lot of feedback. Hey, can you zoom in a little bit more to make it more like WrestleFest? We did that. We added more of a zoomed in camera angle for more of that close up feel to make the sprites look bigger. But we also left that default stuff. So there's like 4 new camera settings in the gameplay options where people can mess around with it. Some people like how it zooms out. Some people, when you go out of the ring, some people said, why can't you leave that just in the normal zoomed in mode? We added that, Can you slow the game down? I just actually answered somebody on Twitter today that very question. He's like, it seems like some of these guys are on cocaine or something.
They might have been.
Yeah.
Based off
Who knows? Who knows? That's not for me to judge. But we were able to. That was one of the things we heard from people, and so we added that as an option that you can slow down the walk speed if you want a little slower of a pace of a game. So we really tried to listen, and obviously you can't do everything every fan suggests. But we tried to use address the ones that we found most common among all of our player base, and tried to get them in as a free portion of the DLC.
So before getting into one feature of the paid DLC that I comes across as something that was clearly highly requested, that'll help, that you brought up with an earlier point about character creation, with the moves itself, there are moves specific for like a Macho Man. In order to have those moves in the game, period, that you'll require to have paid for got the paid DLC,
Right.
correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So one of those moves, and this is just an aside that I was sent, involved Macho Man jumping over the ropes in one of the most fluid things I've seen, and doing a neck snap off the top rope,
Yep.
like while he goes to ringside. I might be wrong in this, but I do believe that's a move that's not even in the 2K games.
that'd be a nice feather to put in my cap.
I need to go through every move in 2K25, but I don't believe there is a fluid animation of someone jumping out and doing the neck snap off the top rope the way you have it for Macho Man. And when I saw that, I'm sitting there going, this is like, it just looks fantastic. Like, this is me just, throwing praise solely because I look at that type of animation stuff, and it shows the passion that goes into this. And speaking of that passion, the game's been out for 4 years. And like you said, this was originally going to be a game that, you were going to get in, get out, and move on to the next one. That obviously isn't what has happened. This might be a question that goes with that, like with an obvious answer, but how much was it because of the support you've gotten from the fans and the players that you decided we're going to stick with this, as opposed to, we've had a 2-year run, we're moving on?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's two primary focuses of that. One is, I mean, I wasn't expecting. We have a really good fan base, and there's people that have been with us since we did pre-orders before in 2019, and then we delayed a couple times until we finally launched the game. I'm not going to blame COVID, which I didn't before, because it was just really just my inadequacies as a developer at that point is why we slipped initially. But, the fan base has been great. And, one of the things in this kind of digital age, a lot of like retro fans, for example, really love that physical cartridge. But one of the big advantages of digital is you can keep updating these games as we go. And I'm like, well, why not give a big value proposition? Because we did get hit a little bit on our initial price too. Yeah. That $30 price point we went with, which most indie games don't do. And this is kind of a little controversial on my end, but I think, with the indie games industry, I think people, the trend has been to release these games super, super cheap. And then it's a lot of these indie developers just are one and done. They can't continue. They don't make enough money. They pour their heart and soul into these games, and then they got to sell it super cheap or it doesn't sell. And one of the things I just wanted to make a statement is, I stand behind this game. I'm very proud of it, and I think it's worth $30.
Yeah.
And I stuck behind that, and I wanted to. But with that said, with the feedback that we got, I did want to make sure that I put as much into that $30 as people could get. So we kept supporting the game and kept pouring our passion into that game and making it as good as we can. So that's one thing. And the second other reason for keep going with RetroMania is it is, and this I'm going to pat myself on the back, the old Barry Horowitz here, right? It's my favorite game. Like, I play it for fun, and sometimes I think I'm supposed to be testing it, and I'm like, well, I just feel like playing. And I'll just play it, and it's nice. I build it so I can go in, play a few matches, and put it down. That's the kind of game, and maybe I'm showing my age a little bit, but I don't have the time to sit there like I did before. As an adult, you have a lot more responsibilities.
Yeah.
And it's a great game that I can pick up, play a couple matches, and then put down. And I just want to keep adding stuff. It'd be cool if we added this. It'd be cool if we added that. And we just want to keep making it better and better and better.
Some of those additions, as we get back to the DLC, as we start to wind down here, new house show game mode, which allows you to play random events of multiple matches for higher scores, a new tournament mode, arcade or promoter for both singles and tag team tournaments, and a new wrestler gear customizer. You mentioned earlier there's no creator wrestler, but this kind of bridges that gap a little to allowing players to kind of make it feel their own. these three big mode additions were, because I'm going to call the customizer a mode in this sense. How did they come together, and how important was it to add them?
Well, that's the thing. I was just thinking, it just doesn't make sense the way our game was designed to do a creator wrestler. That would be kind of a sequel kind of thing, right? I mean, it's just basically a rebuild. And again, that was due to my kind of short-sighted, and you're kind of imposter. Oh, no, is anyone going to want to play this game? You know what I mean? That was kind of the mindset I kind of had going into it a little bit. Not that I wasn't confident we could produce something cool. I just didn't know what the audience would be and how much of an audience we would have. So I said, well, people really liked, one of the things we did on the last update was added additional costumes that people could wear. So at the select screen, you could select between 2 or 3 different colors of a wrestler's gear. And I thought that went over really well. We got a lot of positive feedback. And since that was already built, I was asking our team, what would it take to allow people to make their own costumes, color, palette swaps as it's called. And they're like, oh, we could do that pretty straightforward at this point. So it just adds that extra mode of variety. Again, like you said, it adds that little bit of customization that people can go in and, maybe they want to have the Road Warriors and Warhorse all share the same color scheme and, the Brothers in Paint or something to recreate. But yeah, it adds that little more variety to the game that people can spend a little bit more time in, and to give that little bit more replay value as well.
You also are adding new tag team championship titles and RetroMania and the RetroMania World Championship title. With this, because you already had the NWA's world title and the 10 pounds of gold mode, getting added titles, was this just a way of, we want to give players just another thing to compete for and see challenge and change hands, or is this part of maybe a bigger picture of what you want to do with championships?
Well, so it does tie into something a little bit bigger that's on the list too. But it's funny, we got requested. One of the biggest things we're requested is we want tag team belts.
Yeah,
we want an Intercontinental belt or a US Championship belt. So, and then I did stroke my own ego a little bit, so we put in the RetroMania World Title instead.
Everybody's got to every promotion's got to have their own.
Right. So
even TNA eventually went to their own.
Yep, exactly. So we just wanted to add a little bit more variety, and it kind of goes hand in hand with our arcade tournament mode. The last match, you'll fight whoever the current tag team champions are, or whoever the current RetroMania World Tag Team or World Champion is for singles mode. So we wanted to make kind of a capstone match on the tournament mode. The other thing, in the house show mode, it is random what types of matches you'll get, but it would be cool, we thought, if we could have different main events that come up randomly for the tag team titles or for the NWA or the RetroMania World Championships. So it goes hand in hand with the 2 other new modes that we have. And then on top of that, we added, people are like, well, they got to carry all the belts to the ring. What if they win more than one? So we added that as well, where if you are a 3-time champ, if you're holding the tag team, the RetroMania and NWA, you're walking out in our little entrance walk with holding all 3 belts, which is a nice little touch that we wanted to add.
The last 2 things on this DLC, a new tracking system for the titles with history and statistic. I'm assuming those statistics will include how many defenses and how long the reign lasted.
You got it.
And then the new attract mode intro video. So I was sent a rough copy of this a few months back. And is this just done as an homage to basically what you were inspired by, WrestleFest?
Yes. So yeah, we really, that's a total nostalgia thing for me personally. And I had done, this is out on the internet somewhere, but I had done before RetroMania, I was making a fan game for WrestleFest, and I was going to try to recreate WrestleFest in my spare time and then add 4 new characters to it. And this was just a hobby thing. I wasn't going to charge for it, obviously, because I didn't have the licenses. And I recreated that intro screen with 4 more wrestlers. I think I added Ricky Steamboat, the Honky Tonk Man, and the Hart Foundation to it, which I thought they would have fit they were era appropriate for WrestleFest, that they could have been in that game. And I always liked that attract mode. And I was like, we need to do an attract mode. So, and that's where we start. Now, obviously it's not identical to that, but it's definitely inspired by it.
I don't want to take the focus off this as we wind down. The DLC, the new DLC that includes Macho Man Demolition, Magnum TA, the Rock and Roll Express, 3 new stages, 6 new handicap match types, house show game mode, tournament mode, wrestler customizer, and so much more drops September 13th, $10 all platforms. But what does the future hold for RetroMania Wrestling and RetroSoft Studios?
That's a loaded question here. So
I know. You knew it was coming.
So we still have a planned physical release for RetroMania after this DLC is done. And Limited Run Games wants, all of their DLC. Now, does that prevent us from doing another DLC at a future date? No, it doesn't prevent us contractually of doing that. We're trying to get it all on the cartridge. But one of the things of being digital, it can kind of live forever. You see all these things now where games are getting rebooted or getting updates. I was a big Diablo 2 player. They released an update, I think 20 years to the original Diablo 2 after the game was like done. You know what I mean? So it's kind of one of the good things. I'm as big of a retro gamer and physical guy as anybody. But one of the advantages is you can keep adding and improving games. So is there more in store after that physical release for RetroMania? Quite possibly. And then I guess the other question will be, will there be a sequel at any point? We're thinking about it. I'll say that. I would say the biggest omission is it was the Creator Wrestler. And I'll say if we do anything next, it would really focus around creation versus how we approached RetroMania. Obviously, RetroMania was a love letter to those 80s, 90s arcade games. We wouldn't just do another pixel art game if we were to do something. Yeah. We would want to do something else, and it would really be focused around character creation. So we're throwing ideas around right now. Nothing concrete. We're not announcing anything. We're not definitely doing anything else. But we'll see how this DLC goes. And talk to me in 6 months after we've released the DLC. Maybe I'll have a more concrete answer one way or the other at that point.
Mike, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. I know you've been super busy. We've been trying to plan this for a while. There's been no better time than now to actually get this, especially now that this announcement is out there. You can find more information on RetroMania Wrestling and RetroSoft Studios at RetroManiaWrestling.com, at RetroSoft Studio on Twitter. Is there anything else that the people need to know about before the DLC drops in September?
I would say just the only thing I'll plug here is our Patreon. We don't charge for it. It's free to everybody. But we just kind of give people a little earlier access on the Patreon. I would say it spares my ego a little bit because everybody's kind of a super fan on Patreon, it seems. Yeah. So I get a lot of good constructive criticism there and a lot of good ideas. And it's just, and then we release everything eventually on the other platforms as well. But Patreon's the one I personally manage. I have some help managing our other social media network. I personally do the Patreon one, and we post there at least monthly, if not, sometimes we do a couple in a week. But that's the only other thing. We're at RetroSoft Studios at Patreon. That's the only other thing I'll plug. Stay tuned there and our social media. So we're going to keep. We haven't shown everything in the list that we've been talking about today. So we're going to keep showing some teasers up till that September 13th. And then one other thing, we're going to be at the Retro World Expo with Demolition on the weekend of September 13th for our little launch party weekend there. So if you're in the Hartford, Connecticut area, there's going to be live wrestling there. And Demolition is going to be there signing autographs, and there's going to be the first ever RetroMania video game tournament at the convention as well.
Is the title on the line?
Of course.
It better be. Physical title on the line. It better be.
We got some really cool prizes planned for that.
Mike, thank you again so much. RetroMania Wrestling is available now for Xbox One, PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, and PC via Steam.